What's up, marketing legends, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm producer Liza from X-Growth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So wherever you are, get comfy and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Growth Colony. I'm your host, Shaheen Hoda, and today we're joined by one of the sharpest and most outspoken voices in advertising, Bob Hoffman, better known as the Ad Contrarian. Bob's built a career calling out the marketing industry's obsession with trends and metrics while championing the fundamentals we've forgotten along the way. We'll dive into what those fundamentals are today, why they matter more than ever, and maybe even ruffle a few feathers in the process. Which
I hope so.
Yes, Bob's expertise.
Otherwise, I'm going back to sleep.
So let's dive in, Bob. Look, it's an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. I'm super excited.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I want to start with what's the story with? I'll just take a sample from your last. We don't even need to go deep. From your last newsletter. Okay. You call out a lot of big people.
Very big people. Biggest I could find, yeah.
I know. I mean, just from your last newsletter, you call out the CEO of Google. You call out the CEO of Association of National Advertisers, Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, Larry Page. I mean, the list goes on. Jack Dorsey. The list goes on.
Yeah. What's the question?
How do you decide who to go after?
I go after people who are full of shit, and it's really quite simple. That's what I try to do. I try to expose hypocrisy and bullshit where I find it. And, in this particular case, I called out 10 people who told us about how consumers were going to love online advertising, how they were going to, how wonderful they were going to feel about it. And I put in quotes from them. I'm not just making this up. I put their quotes in there. And then I showed research that says not only do consumers not like online advertising, they hate it. As far as consumers are concerned, online advertising is the number one most problematic part of their internet experience. And 4 out of 5 don't like the idea that data is being collected to serve them, quote, personal advertising. And everything these people said about online advertising was bullshit. And I called it out. And, the world needs another point of view. We can't just listen to these. We can't just listen to these big shots who don't know what they're talking about. I'll bet you there's not one of them in that whole list. I think there were 10 people on that list that I quoted. I'll bet you there's not one of them who ever made an ad in his or her life, yet they're pretending to be experts on advertising, and they're not.
Do you ever feel like you're ruffling too many feathers?
I don't care.
Instance or, I don't know, comments or emails?
No, the more feathers I ruffle, the happier I am. I don't have a job. Nobody can fire me. I don't care. I don't care if they like me or not. It's of no consequence to me at all. I just, I've been writing and speaking about advertising for a long time. And, I've seen a lot of it, and I know who's trustworthy and who's not. I know who you can believe and who you can't believe. And, I don't know everything, but I think I know enough to write about it sensibly. But most important, it doesn't really matter what I think. It's the facts that count. Doesn't matter what you think. Doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter. It's the facts that tell the story. necessary. And so, I don't rely on just my opinion. I publish what I think, but whenever possible, whenever there's facts to be had, I try to back it up with facts. And in this, the piece that you're referring to, there's no question that these people were dead wrong. And, there's evidence, there's research to prove they were dead wrong. And why should I be afraid to publish that?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, the way you write and the way you formulate your thoughts are not only entertaining, but I mean, it's very educational, very entertaining at the same time. So to all listeners, I'll definitely recommend subscribing to Bob's newsletter, because it's probably one of the 5 newsletters that I will not miss. It would sit in my inbox. If I can't read it right now, it will sit there until I can read it. So, I think more people need to take your approach, but it's hard. It's hard. There are interests. There are.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Most of the people who write about advertising do it for a living. They need to make money in the advertising business. They don't want to piss all the big shots off. I don't blame them. I wouldn't do it. If my career was dependent on these bozos, I wouldn't piss them off. But it's not. I don't care what they think. So I have the great freedom of being unemployed, and so I say what I think.
Bob, I want to touch on something that I think it's very, very important to you, and I want to start this conversation around the fundamentals of marketing that you feel like we're missing out on, or it's not as prevalent as it used to be. You talk a lot about strategy taking over, quote unquote, data taking over. I'd love to kind of hear from your thoughts, and let's start this conversation with what are the fundamentals of marketing and advertising that not a lot of people are talking about.
Let me issue a disclaimer. I'm not a marketing guy. I'm a copywriter. I'm an advertising guy. And I have opinions about marketing, but they're unreliable. If I were you, I wouldn't rely on my opinions about marketing. I've never taken a marketing class in my life, and I don't consider myself any kind of expert on marketing. But I do know something about advertising, and advertising is a small part of marketing. Marketers have a lot on their plate that is not related to advertising. Marketers have to know things that I know nothing about: distribution and finance and pricing and customer relations and channel marketing, all that kind of stuff. I don't know anything about that. I know about advertising, but I have opinions about marketing. And I think
we want those opinions. Wow.
Yeah. And I think marketers are very, very confused about what they're doing. And I think marketing people are not reliable as a result of that. I think they, particularly as it relates to marketing communication, I'm happy to talk about that. I don't want to talk about the other things that marketers do because I don't know anything about that. But when it comes to marketing communication, you need to start with the basics. Why will someone buy this product and not that product? What is it that makes someone want this product and not that product? And it's a very difficult question to answer. But if you don't have an answer in your mind, then you don't really know what you're doing. You're confused. There are a million things about marketing that can confuse you. But if you don't have a good philosophy about marketing, about why marketing works, and because marketing isn't about the things that marketers are obsessed with. Marketers are obsessed with with platforms and media budget and this stuff and that. But that's not what marketing is about. How human beings behave. And you have to have a theory about how human beings behave if you're going to be a good marketer. And that's one of the hardest things in the world to understand, because human behavior is very difficult to figure out. But what you have to do is you have to go with likelihoods and probabilities, because nothing in marketing, nothing in human behavior is absolute. There's no black and white. There's no yes and no. Nothing you do is guaranteed to work. It's just a question of likelihoods and probabilities. What is the most likely way that I can motivate someone to buy my product? What is the most likely way to build a brand? What's the most likely way to become successful? And, the fundamentals are simple. First, you have to make a product worth buying. Then, as a marketer, you have to make that product available and attractive. And as an advertiser, you have to make that product famous. You have to get people to know what the product is. And if you do those things, your likelihood of success is very high. I shouldn't say very high, is much higher than if you don't do those things. If you don't do those things, you are likely not to be successful. And so when when you think of things as a marketer, you have to simplify your thinking, because otherwise you're going to be all over the map. You're going to be doing all kinds of things that may or may not work, instead of focusing on, I say as a guy who's worked in advertising for a million years, the focus is you got to make your product as famous as you can. If you can make your product famous, you have a much better chance of success. You have a huge advantage over your competition if your product is famous and theirs isn't. And that's true in all aspects of life. People who are famous, things that are famous, are much more likely to be acceptable than things that aren't. That's just human nature and human behavior.
You talk about this in the very first chapter of your new book, which I recommend to everybody to
I do
read.
too. It's called The 3-Word Brief, and it's right up there.
That's right. It's a great read. It's a great read.
Thank you.
And you talk about, you just put it in such simple terms right at the beginning, and you're like, the objective is to become famous, and it has no fluff. There's just no beating around the bush. Can we a little bit explore, if I'm like, okay, I get it. I need to make my product famous. How do I approach that? What are the key components that do I need to buy the right tech? Do I need to have the right strategy? What are the things that I need to have in place to make that happen?
Yeah, well, I'm going to address this from an advertising standpoint, because that's what I know best. And what you need to do is to do something that leaves a lasting impression. You have to do advertising. I call it Impressionism. In the advertising world, we talk about do we do emotional or logical, and blah, blah, blah. And really, the most important thing is to leave an impression. Advertising that does not leave a significant impression is a waste of money. And from that standpoint, it's about creativity. It's about marketing is about strategy. Advertising is about execution. Advertising is about ideas. It's about creativity. And one of the problems I see with marketers is that they're not good improvisers. I think I talk about this in the book. Marketers, they learn a certain way of doing things, and they stick with that way of doing things regardless of the circumstances. And they're not taught how to improvise. They're not taught how to throw away what they've learned and do something different. There's a brilliant scientist named Richard Feynman. He won the Nobel Prize in Physics, and brilliant guy. And he said something about scientists, or some scientists, and I'm going to say this about marketing people. Most marketing people are clever enough to understand what they're taught, but they're not clever enough to question what they've been taught and to throw it out and to do something else. And that, I worked with a lot of marketing people in my career, and that was the one thing about them that I always noticed. You wanted to do something in a different way. You wanted to go against what they were taught in their MBA classes. And that was a no-no. Weren't allowed to do that. Had to do it their way.
Why do you think that that's the case?
Because it's hard to think for yourself. It's easy to follow the rules. It's hard to think for yourself. I don't know what it is that makes me skeptical, but I think skepticism is one of the most valuable aspects of being good at advertising and marketing. To be skeptical. And when someone says something, the first thing that pops into your head should be, how do you know that? And if you think that way, and you listen to all the bullshit artists in our business talk, and as you're listening, you're saying to yourself, how does she know that? How does he know that? And what you find is the way they know these rules, the way they know these things, is often very questionable and very suspect. And when you dig into it, even the research they pull out is questionable very often. Before I got into advertising, I was a science teacher. And I don't claim for a second to be a scientist, but as a scientist, as a science teacher, I had to know how real scientists work. And real scientists work in order to know the difference between a fact and an opinion. Very difficult. If you're in any kind of scientific endeavor and you publish a paper, there are 100 people out there waiting to tear you apart. And unless your science is good, your research doesn't hold up. And what passes for research in the marketing business would be laughed out of any real scientific laboratory in the world, because most of it is concocted. Someone's trying to prove a point. They're not really trying to learn the facts, because who funds research? Research is funded by someone who's out to prove something. You don't have neutral parties doing research in the advertising business. You have it paid for by either clients or agencies or consultants, someone with a point to prove. So,
or the big tech.
I'm sorry?
Or the big tech.
Or the big tech. So you have to be careful. Research is just like creative. Some of it is very good and some of it is very bad. And you have to, just because you call it research doesn't make it science, believe me. And you have to be careful about what you believe and whose research is real research and whose research is thinly disguised points to prove.
Bob, I want to go back.
Have I pissed everyone off? Is there anyone I missed who I haven't pissed off yet?
Oh, I think we got a couple more questions. We have a couple more opportunities. I want to go back and touch on something you talked about, that the improvisation, the ability to improvise, and how you in your experience you found that marketers don't have as that muscle is not as strong.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to hear how you talked about being skeptical, and I feel like that's part of it. What were other ways that you strengthened that muscle for yourself?
I was born with that muscle. I grew up in a family that was, if you said something that was bullshit, man, they were down your throat in a second. You could not get away with bullshit in my family. You just couldn't. And so I learned that muscle really quickly, and I learned to be skeptical really early. And how you develop that muscle is, I think, in that one sentence that I said a few minutes ago. When you're listening to some big shot talk, or anyone at all talk, and they're trying to tell you something that they know, you want to ask yourself, how does he know that? How does she know that? And unless they can convince you that they know it for a good reason, then you have to be skeptical of what they're trying to tell you. That's how you develop that muscle. You need to think that way. You need to think, how does he know that? You're listening to me talk now. Every one of your listeners should be thinking, how does Bob know that? And if I can't answer that question correctly, then then what I said should be irrelevant, shouldn't matter to them. But if I can prove it, and if I can convince them, that's a different thing.
I think it's a very important exercise, but it's also a very exhausting exercise.
You know what? Not if you do it all the time.
Yeah, you failed that
Seriously,
much.
I mean, if you incorporate it as a way of thinking, it's not that exhausting. I listen to things all the time, listen to people talk all the time, and what's going through my mind all the time is, how does he know it? How does she know it? And, maybe it's exhausting if you're not used to it. But if you can make yourself used to it.
Because the reason I say that is I feel like, a lot of people would just want to say, all right, great, they gave me this information, I'm going to take it.
Right.
Versus, no, I'm gonna dig deeper, and I gotta need to know all the details. And
Right.
and a lot of people will be like, I just don't have time for that. Don't worry about it. I'll take it.
If you don't have time to know the truth, then you don't have time to have a job in marketing or advertising. Because unless you know the truth, you're just kidding yourself, you're kidding your clients, you're kidding your people. I mean, if you don't want to take the time to find out what's real and what's not real, get another job.
Well, I mean, any job, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
That would be a problem. Yeah. Let's go back to Impressionism.
Impressionism,
So it needs to make an impression.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on Jaguar's rebrand? I mean, they made an impression on a lot of people. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not enough. That's not the whole job. That's just part of the job. Jaguar's rebrand is a total mess. It's a disaster. They're not going to get anywhere with that. That is some art director's wet dream. It's they made an impression because the advertising industry paid attention to it. No one else in the world gave a shit about it. It was the advertising and marketing industry talking to themselves, our little bubble of echo chamber, all of us talking about it. Outside of us, go on the street and ask someone what they think of the Jaguar rebrand. They go, what? The what? They won't know what they won't know what we're talking about. So it's a nothing burger. They're not going to continue with that. I guarantee you. They'll come to their senses at some point. And
you reckon they're going to go back to the original?
I don't know what they're going to do, but it ain't going to be that. That I can tell you.
It's which box of it didn't tick. I mean, it made an impression on maybe a small group or maybe on our bubble. Is it the attractiveness? I mean, from the foundational pieces, I want to make sure that we cover all the foundational pieces that are you believe that are critical. Is it the attractiveness that it missed, or was there another element or a combination of elements that it missed?
You want to be logical about this. This advertising is not about logic, Shaheen. Advertising, you want me to give you logical reasons why what they're doing is not going to work. Marketing is about logic. When in business, if you can think logically, you can do very well, because 95% of what you do is just getting from A to B logically. That's what business is about. That's what marketing is about. It's not what advertising is about. Advertising isn't. You can't take your logic skills that you learned in business school and apply that to advertising, because advertising doesn't work that way. Advertising is not a court case where you go in and you make your case and your competitor goes in and he makes it. Whoever makes the best case wins. Doesn't work that way. It works on Impressionism. And Impressionism is very hard to define. And it's hard you want me to give you logical reasons why I think what they did stinks. But I can't. I can just tell you, I feel that it stinks. It just misfires in so many directions. You can always get attention by standing on your head naked if that's what you want to do. But that ain't enough. You have to. There has to be something within it that is either intelligent or funny or entertaining or beautiful. And that thing has none of that. To me, that thing is is trying so hard to be hip, and as a result, it is so not hip because it's trying so hard. I don't know.
I'm also thinking about some of our listeners who, might be at a leadership level, or they might be small business owners, right?
Yep.
And they want to get ahead in whatever they're doing. And a lot of the small business owners think logically. It's all about
95% of what you're going to do, you have to think logically. But there's 5%, there's the advertising part. Logic doesn't work.
I don't know if you have an advice for people who have a very strong kind of logical background. How would you say, because there are some business owners that have a very good knack for this. You see them, they're pushing it, and from getting famous and all that stuff. What is your advice for those who don't have that muscle and want to further develop it?
Don't bother. Find someone who you trust. Find a good, I'm talking about advertising now. Find a good creative person who's done really good advertising, who you trust, and let that person do the hard work for you. Because if you don't have that in you, it's best to recognize it. I don't know if you know baseball analogies. I may be a very good pitcher, but a very bad hitter. So I need hitters on my team. And if you're a very logical, sound business person, doesn't really have that creative thing, find someone who does. And it doesn't have to be an employee. It can be a freelancer. It could be an agency. It could it's a very rare. There aren't that many really creative people. Why are there so many crappy books and crappy movies and crappy songs? Because it's very hard to do good stuff. Really hard. And the same is true in advertising. Why is so much advertising crappy? Because it's very hard to do good. It's way harder than anyone who's never had to do it thinks. You think you can make good ads. Give it a try sometime. You'll be shocked. It's not easy.
Humbled.
Believe me, my first 10 years in the advertising business, I was humbled a lot. I did some stuff that I thought was really, terrific, and it was crap. And it took me years to figure out how to do something good. And, even when I thought I'd figured it out, plenty of what I did was crappy anyway. Because, you try, nobody sets out to make bad ads. Everyone's trying to make great ads. It's not easy. It's very hard.
Bob, I want to touch on something slightly different.
Yeah.
And I want to get your thoughts on, I know you're a big fan of Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah. Favorite guy.
Yeah, favorite guy. I want to get your thoughts on the past 18 months and how Zuckerberg's image has changed in the past 18 months. What are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like there's definitely an element of personal advertising in there.
Yeah, he's got some PR people working. They got him a new hairdo.
Yeah, he's now surfing. He's now doing jiu-jitsu. What are your thoughts about that kind of change? And
I don't care about that. The guy's a jerk. I don't like him. I think he's one of the most dangerous people on the planet. He's never taken responsibility for the damage that his company has done. Can I give you an example?
Yeah, please.
2018, a group of Facebook executives did a study of how people on Facebook wound up in extremist groups. And they found that 64% of the people who wound up in extremist groups on Facebook were led there by the Facebook algorithm. This was the conclusion of Facebook executives. And they never did a damn thing about it. It's still going on. It has resulted in very, very unpleasant outcomes politically and socially. And I think when the history of this era is written, it will shine a very, very dark light on Zuckerberg and the other social media billionaires. and how irresponsible they were and how much damage they did to individuals and to society. And, I don't care what kind of haircut he has or if he goes surfing, any of that bullshit. I just don't like the guy, and I don't think, I don't know why he's an important person other than the fact that he's got all that money.
I was going to go down the route of talking about personal branding, but I think this is, what you touched on is a very, very important component, and it's one that I've taken away, reading Ad Scam, another book of yours. You touch on this quite heavily in your newsletter as well, and it was definitely an eye opener for me, of really starting to think in that fashion. I think it's important to kind of bring that up here as well. I was thinking of going down the path of talking to you a little bit about personal branding, because it is a hot topic. A lot of people are talking about it. There's a lot of thoughts about it, about what to do and what not to do. And I really like to get your thoughts, because I feel like whether intentional or unintentional, you have a very strong personal brand. I mean, I can read your newsletter without your name attached to it, and I'll be like, this is familiar, and I think this is maybe something that Bob's written. What are your thoughts on, what is your philosophy on personal branding?
I don't have one. I like to feel like I don't have a personal brand. I have a personality, and those are different things. It's something that doesn't occur to me, so I don't have a strong point of view about it. I just know that for me, if I have a personal brand, it comes from having a point of view that is different, having a point of view that is clear and I'm not trying to be someone else. And one of the things is that I have access to media. I'm sure there are, 10,000 people in the world smarter about this stuff than I am, but I have access to media because I have a newsletter and people like you do interviews with me and stuff like that. But it's not anything that I set out intentionally to do. From my point of view, a brand is not something that you do by branding. A brand is a byproduct. It comes from, for a product. Let's not talk about me. Let's talk about a product. If your product is high quality and you treat your customers well and you do advertising or communications that makes you famous, that's how you build a brand. You don't build a brand by doing branding, whatever that, I don't even know what that fucking word means. It's so, if I put a logo on my socks, is that branding? So brands are a byproduct. And I think the same is true for a personal brand. It comes from, not from trying to build a brand, but from doing things with some degree of consistency and differentiation and all those marketing things that we talk about all the time. And if you do that stuff right, a successful brand will be a byproduct of that. But if you start out thinking, oh, I'm going to do branding first, and then, well, is our product any good? Is our communication any good? Is our customer service any good? Is this any good? That's backwards. That doesn't work. You have to start with the fundamentals, get the fundamentals right, communicate them right, and a personal brand will be a byproduct.
You obviously talk about this in the book as well, about brand and how meaningless that word is. I wonder what your thought is. One of the terms that is in the marketing industry or advertising industry that's thrown around a lot is, oh, this is a brand campaign, or this is a lead gen campaign. Give me your thoughts on that statement alone.
Yeah. It's the wrong words for the right reason. Okay, there's two different kinds of advertising. Basically, there's offer advertising, which is essentially retail advertising, and it's what we call now performance advertising. And basically, it's an offer. Save 20% this week. Buy one, get one. We get those emails. We get 50 of those emails every day. And those are essentially of the first lineage of advertising, the direct response lineage of advertising. And then there's the brand building, product building lineage of advertising. And that is, it's not about short-term offer style advertising. It's about long-term getting people to respect and understand what your product is and what you do. And, that used to be the dominant, I shouldn't say it used to be the dominant, but it used to be more important than it is these days. These days, everyone is going towards the direct response type of ad, particularly online advertising is essentially almost all direct response advertising. And, there's a lot of research that shows that in the long run, the direct response type of advertising is not as effective as the what you call what people in the business call brand advertising, and that in the long run, the brand type of advertising builds businesses more successfully than the short-term offer style of advertising. And I think, from a gut feel, I believe that's true. And from research I've seen, I think that's true. There's a famous book by Les Binet and Peter Field called The Long and Short of It, in which they have some significant research that demonstrates this. And I think other people have also done that. So, so the two lineages of now, if you're in some cases, there are some businesses that can't afford to do long term. They can't exist without sales today. And it would be lovely to have a beautiful brand 3 years from now, but we have to exist this week. And that's one of the reasons that that successful brands have such an advantage over non-success, because successful brands have the wherewithal financially to do both. Let's do business today, but also let's build a brand for 3 and 5 years from now. So, that's a wonderful luxury to have. And some companies don't have it, particularly startups. They don't have it. They need, if they don't have business this week, they close the doors next week. So so it's a very fine balance, and you have to know how to do it. And it's not easy, but in general, if you have the wherewithal, you have to have both short-term and long-term goals that you can support with marketing communications.
I think it's Mark Ritson. He paints a very grim picture, and basically agreeing with you, but saying, this is why majority of startups will not work, and they are at such a massive disadvantage, and they will, unless there's some fundamentals in place that
right.
completely catapult them forward.
Think about it. If you go into a supermarket as a customer, are you going to buy Coca-Cola or Bob's Cola? The likelihood is you're going to buy Coca-Cola. If you're a buyer for the supermarket and you have to stock cola, are you going to stock Coca-Cola or Bob's Cola? You're going to stock Coca-Cola because you can sell. That's why fame is so important. It's not just a consumer advantage. It's a business to business advantage as well. If you're famous, people answer your phone calls. People reply to your emails. If they never heard of you, who's he? I don't have time to talk to him. But if Mr. Coca-Cola calls, I'll talk to the president of Coca-Cola. You betcha. Get him on the phone.
I want to ask some rapid fire questions before we get into rapid fire. Is there anything else that you think is important that maybe on this topic or the topics that we've discussed that maybe I haven't asked the question?
No, I think you've asked good questions.
Okay.
And I'm not just saying that because you give me $10,000. I'm saying I really believe that.
It means a lot coming from you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do some rapid fire questions. So first question I'm very curious of is, what is one resource that maybe in the past 3 to 6 months you've come across that has had a pretty profound impact on you? And this by resource, I mean it could be a book, a podcast, blog, whatever it is? What comes to mind?
We're talking about business now, or we're talking about
Could be
life in
anything.
general?
It could be anything.
Anything. The new movie about Bob Dylan. What's it called? A Complete Unknown. And it had an impact on me because I'm an amateur musician. I have a little amateur recording studio down in my basement where I do hideous covers of other people's music. And so I've been doing like covers of Bob Dylan songs now. It's fun. That's have a lot of.
I've seen it. I've seen a bit of it. And it looks very impressive. Basement. Yeah. Okay. Question number 2: if you could give just one advice to marketers, what would it be? Marketers and advertisers. It's. I know it's hard to kind of bundle them together.
No, it's not. It's what I said before. Be skeptical. That's my most important advice I can give you. Skepticism is a huge business advantage. If you can separate the wheat from the chaff, the truth from the bullshit, you're way ahead of most of your competitors.
But who are some of the people that you look to, or you enjoy their content and you hold in high regard?
Dave Trott, Mark Ritson, Byron Sharp, Karen Nelson Field, Orlando Wood. Who am I missing? Brian Jacobs, and there are more. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, but more than someone. But those come list. First to mind. Yeah, a lot of them have strong opinions, which I enjoy. They're not wishy-washy. I don't always agree with them, but I appreciate their opinions, and I admire them for expressing them strongly.
Last question I have, Bob.
Last question.
There's a lot of things that I don't want to say going wrong, but they're not positive in the advertising space. I'm curious, what is something that you are excited about when it comes to advertising space?
Honestly, there's nothing that I'm excited about in the advertising space. I honestly, I think the only thing that I might be excited about is that the holding companies seem to be dissipating. That they used to have, if you go back several years, the big holding companies had like over 50% market share worldwide of advertising. Now they're under 25%. So the idea that that the agency business is becoming an entrepreneurial business again is exciting to me, where it's becoming a bottom-up business rather than a top-down business. It used to be agencies were small and they would grow and grow, and some people would leave that agency and then they'd start another agency and then would grow. And the agency industry grew bottom-up. Now it's top-down, where the big holding companies, who aren't advertising people at all, they're financial institutions that buy advertising agencies and milk them. That's what has happened in recent years, and I'm hoping that I'm seeing that trend being reversed. And if that happens, that would be very good for the agency business and the agency industry as a whole, because who the hell knows the difference between an Omnicom and a WPP? They're all the same. I don't know. They're all the same. They're just financial institutions, and they've bought up all the ad agencies, and they've become very. It's hard to know the difference between them. And we used to have agencies where we knew this one was good for this, and this agency did that kind of stuff, and this was good for research, that one's good for marketing, this one's good for creative work, this one's good for television, this one's good for print. And we had all kinds of different agencies, and they were nicely differentiated. And now we have holding companies, and who the hell knows the difference?
They do everything
between one another. Yeah.
Bob, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It was a great chat. I really,
good.
I took a whole page of notes of things that I should look up, things that I should read on a bit more, and I'm sure it's going to be the same thing for a lot of listeners. So, just want to say again, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Good luck to you and to all your viewers.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Liza Maywald and Alexander Hipwell. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Liza and Alexander. Special thanks to Tina Wabe, we couldn't make this show without you. This episode was hosted by Shaheen Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to know more about Growth Colony, check out our newsletter and subscribe with the link in the pod description. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just interested in a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. Or fill out the form in the description. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week right here on Growth Colony.